Have you ever absolutely just screwed up that beautiful $20 ribeye by turning it into shoe leather? Well, I have. Stick around and I'll show you how to cook the perfect steak every time. If you don't already know, we're going to introduce a cooking method called sous vide. That's a French word and it means cooking in a vacuum. Sometimes it's also called immersion circulator. Okay, here's the Innova immersion circulator sitting in the water bath, and I've got a little rack in there as well to hold it down under the water. First thing I'm going to do is plug it in and wait a few seconds for it to wake up. And what it's going to do is going to tell me what the current temperature of the water is there. And at this point, if I want to change the temperature, would touch that, and then I could plus or minus, or I want to set the time up for this cook. Now, if I just hit plus, it does 5 minutes at a time, but if I hold down the plus, I can go 2 hours. And then I would hit start. That's all there is to it. It'll heat up, and after it reaches 132 degrees, it'll start the countdown timer. I mean, you don't have to pay any attention to it. And if you happen to miss it and it goes to be 3 hours or 4 hours, you can't overcook this thing. You can't overcook this thing because it cannot get any hotter than the temperature of the water around it. And that's what makes it an almost foolproof method. You'd have to leave the thing in there for a day or two before the meat would actually get ruined. Okay, we're ready to put the steak in the sous vide cooker. I vacuum seal all my steaks when I buy them in plastic, but I don't like to cook in plastic because of the plastic microplastics that get on the food when the plastic gets hot. So as a general rule, plastic is pretty good to store stuff in, but you don't want to cook things in it. I like to salt my steak before I put it in the sous vide bag. The amount of salt that you use is something that you'll have to just learn for yourself. I've learned exactly how much I can use. I started by using less salt than I think I'd need, and then if it wasn't salty enough, I salted it when I ate it. But you'd get a feel for how much to use after a while. Now this is a silicone rubber sous vide bag, and you don't have to vacuum seal it. When you put it down in the sous vide cooker, the air will get forced out around it and come out the top, and the top stays open. You just want to make sure that it stays underwater. So you see, I put it down into the cooker in the rack and push it down, and just flop the top of the bag over the side, close the lid, and that'll hold it in place. And we're going to cut to about 2 hours later when I'm getting ready to sear it. So the sous vide cooking is now done. I use carbon steel pans. They're almost as heavy as a cast iron pan, but boy, do they get hot, and they really hold their heat evenly. So I like to cook my steaks in butter. I use Kerrygold. Evidently, that's supposed to be some grass-fed butter. I take about 4 of these little half-size paper towels because before you sear a steak, you want to make sure that it's relatively dry. So while the pan's heating up and the butter is heating up, I'm going to put a chunk of butter in the pan. Be time to get the bag out of the cooker, and I usually leave the water in this thing at least a week, then I change it because the water never touches the food, and it's a lot of water to keep filling up and dumping. So I unplug it, take out the bag. This is where a nice little set of tongs will come in handy. Get some tongs and pull out the steak and it looks kind of limp, and I don't know if it looks unappetizing, but it doesn't look like it's quite ready to eat. But that steak is cooked through a perfect medium rare, and all that's left is just throw it in the screaming hot pan, sear it maybe a minute on each side, and that's all there is to it. So it doesn't really take long to make a steak like this. You got a couple of minutes of throwing it in the sous vide bag, a couple of minutes of taking it out of the sous vide bag and blotting it off. Now, when you don't need to salt it because it's already been salted, and want to make sure we sear the edges of the steak first. And the pan may not be completely hot enough yet, but it's hot enough to start searing the edges. Now, I have put a link down in the description below for all of these different items that you need to sous vide, like I'm doing here. You need the immersion circulator. The one I use is made by Anova. You need that plastic tub to hold the water, and it comes with that metal rack and the lid. These are affiliate links, and if you decide to buy them from my links, Amazon will actually pay me a very small commission, and I would appreciate that. It helps the channel. Now we sear the one side of the steak. Going to let this go for about a minute. This obsessive wiping habit that I have comes from being in the restaurant business, where it seems like you cook and you wipe and you cook and you wipe and you cook and you wipe, and some people might call that obsessive compulsive, but it's a lot less cleaning up when you're finally done. One of the things when you eat a steak is have a sharp knife. It just makes it so much easier, and believe it or not, I buy these knives at Sam's Club, kitchen knives, and they're like 2 for $10. They work great. You can sharpen them. They're not, going to be as good as these $100 German knives, but they'll last you for years. Just a little check of the temperature, and right there, 500 plus degrees on the bottom of the pan. That's about what you want to get a good sear on a steak. Oh man, look at that. Flip it over. Wait till you see what the inside looks like when I cut it open. I have other ways of cooking steaks too, but this is probably the easiest and quickest if you remember to put the thing in to the circulator a couple hours before you want to cook it. We'll get into some of these other methods in some upcoming videos. I usually flip it once, but generally no more. Like I said, generally about a minute aside. There's that wiping again. Okay, we take the steak out, put it on a plate. I use this fancy plate, makes me feel special. And then whatever butter's left in the pan, you just pour it on top. And just be careful not to burn yourself when you do this. And that's it. They tell you to let a steak rest for a while, but I generally don't when I cook it with this method because it's not going to be overcooked. And resting will let a steak come up to temperature, but you're not applying all that much heat to it, cooking it this way. And there you have it. It is completely pinkish all the way from end to end except for the sear. Perfect medium rare. And I'm telling you, you will not cook a better steak for yourself than this way.